Hey Wayne Fox, I have a sheet of 13 by 19 paper. I need to print an 11 by 14 on this sheet, and I need the print to have a 2-inch border. I try to do this in a way that's really fast and efficient so I can just cut it out and it's exactly 11 by 14 and the print's exactly in the middle and the borders are all perfect because the mat's already cut, and I just want to be able to throw this on a mat board, throw the mat on it, shrink wrap it so I can put it up in my gallery and try to sell it. I obviously am trying to make this pretty efficient because I make quite a few of them. And I found a pretty cool way to do that so the borders are perfect. One problem is on an Epson is if you try to use the outside of the paper, if you position it, most of the time you're going to end up with a border that's an 1/8 of an inch or even 3/16 of an inch too small. So it's better if you can put some kind of guideline so you can just cut all 4 sides. It's way faster. I'm going to load this paper up in the printer here. It's an Epson P9000. All you do to load a sheet of paper is drop it in, line it up with a line on the right, hit the down arrow button, wait till the OK, hit OK, and then you're ready to go. So let's go over to the computer and I'll show you how I set this up. Now the second part, I show how to take this to another level where I can print multiple prints on one sheet of paper that all have perfect borders, all have cut guides, and you can cut them all up ready to mat just a few seconds. So let's do this one first. Okay, so here we are in Lightroom. Let's move over to the print module. I've got a collection selected which shows most of my finished images. I like to print from collections because then I can print from different folders at the same time. First thing I need to do is check my layout style. This needs to be a custom package layout style. Next I need to go to my page setup and select my 13 by 19 sheet of paper. You notice I have one here. I prefer using custom sizes most of the time rather than selecting one of the default built-in ones. Let me just show how this layout is built. So if I go to my 13 by 19 custom paper here, you notice the paper size is 13 inches wide. One comment on this, one important thing to note is the printer doesn't care what you're putting on the piece of paper. You're telling the printer you're putting a 13-inch wide piece of paper in it. Doesn't matter if you're trying to print a 19-inch long print, the printer doesn't care. So the width is always the width of the piece of paper you're putting in the printer. That's what it needs to know. You notice I have all the margins set to 0 because I'm going to control those myself. I'm not trying to put any ink out next to the edge on a bordered print. So it works better to just put these at 0. So let's hit OK and hit OK. Now my goal here is to print 11 by 14 with a 6 by 9 inch image in the middle of it. So we're going to add a cell. Easiest way is just to click any one of these over here. And rather than, you can drag it to resize it if you want, but we know what we want here. It's easier just to type it in, 14 by 11. The one thing I know is I can put this rectangle pretty much anywhere I want in this sheet, except here, or here, or here, or here. I can't put any of the edges at the edge because Epson printers just can't quite get the margins that accurate. And so to make up for that, I'm just going to put it in the middle because what I'll end up with is 4 little lines that I can cut on, and then my print is perfectly centered. Next, let's add another cell. I'm going to click a big one just to show you what happens. Sometimes if there's not room on the page, it will do this, and that's okay. Just drag it over and then close that extra page up. And here again, we're going to do the same thing. We're just going to tell it how big we want it. So 9 by 6. What we want to do is center this exactly inside this 11 by 14. Easiest way to do that, and really the biggest tip of the video, is to pop this in the corner, hold the Option or Alt key and click in this and drag it and let go. Drag this one into the other corner. And now as long as we have snapping on, you'll notice that grid snap I have set to cells. I'm going to drag this corner down and I'm going to let it snap to that other corner. Boom, right there. And it's pretty obvious when it snaps. Now all I've got to do is go over here and divide this one by 2. Now you notice my cell still says 9 by 6. For some reason when you Option Alt drag a cell and make a new one, this is still referring to the original cell. I think it's a bug. So if I click back and click, now I can actually see this cell and its size. Pretty easy here. It's 2.5 by 2.5. Now we drag this to the bottom And now we drag and pop this corner in here. And now we can eliminate that square. And when we get done, we're going to have an 11 by 14 small gray line to cut on, and this 6 by 9 will be exactly in the middle. Now to get that gray line, we have to make sure we're over here on the print job, and we have to, on the page, we have to go down here and make sure cut guides are set to on. You can see that the little lines I'm getting are there because I have cut guides turned on. You have two choices. You can have it on lines, which I prefer. You can also have it set to be crop marks, which gives you these two little bitty lines here. But the problem I have with that is these two lines will show. If I set it to lines, then nothing shows on my actual 11 by 14 when I'm finished. I just cut out these four little gray lines and it's perfect print. Now this will take a little longer to print than it needs to because we have to print these lines from here to here and from here to here. If these lines weren't there, then the printer would be able to stop printing. So I typically want to get rid of those, and how I do that is I add another cell. Now I drag this cell, and basically what I'm doing is covering that up. I'm going to Option or Alt for PC, drag this cell down here, let it pop there. I have to let go of the mouse and then re-click before it will pop, and then I'm going to go there. And so now I have my layout, and I can drag a picture. Let's find a good one to drag. I'm going to drag this one here into here, and I'm ready to finish setting it up. I'm not going to go through all the other process. There's several tricks to print settings and a few tricks to the other things. And I know a lot of people complain that they can't just hit the print button and print. If you set all this up right and then you save a template, you can hit the print button as long as you don't change anything from the template. But a lot of times you're not sure what that template has stored in it, and that's going to be a whole nother video. But one thing I will tell you is that when you hit the print button, all it does is bypass this dialog box. That's all it does. If you hit printer button and you go to this and you don't actually change anything, the print button would have done the same thing. In this case, we need to make sure it's set up to roll paper or sheet paper, sorry. And it is premium luster. I'm going to go ahead and use super photo. So those are the settings. I've already got my profile and everything already set up, so I'm not going to bother showing you that. That's another video. This is just about how to create the bordered prints. Hit print, and let's see what we've got. So our print's just about finished printing. It's going to keep going because it's got to print these little gray lines. So even though it's going back and forth, all it's printing is a little tiny line, but it takes a few more minutes, but it saves so much time later, it's well worthwhile. And there, it's all done now. Well, I thought it was all done. There we go. Now we just have to hit the button and it'll eject it. And there's our print. And I don't know if you can see this. I'm going to move this in a little closer so hopefully you can see it. So you can see I've got a really thin, very faint black line. And all I've got to do is slice this on that line. And I have a perfect 11 by 14 with perfectly even borders. Now my challenge is I usually print this on roll paper. And that way I can print either 2 across or 3 across or even 4 across. The advantage of that is it's a lot faster. And one other advantage is if I use roll paper, I can get it so I don't have to cut the top lines. I just have to basically slice the 11-inch side and I'm done. So I'm going to show how to do that. I'm going to throw some 24-inch paper in here and then we'll set this up to print 2 of these. I'm not going to bother putting my gloves on. I usually wear gloves to do this, but these are just for the sake of time. So to load this paper here, if I push it through like that, I always grab it with my left hand. I put a little tension on it as I close it. I've got it. Hit the OK button again. Now I'm ready to head back and set up my lap and print 2 across. And I'll even have less cutting to do on this 2 11 by 14s than I did the one I just printed. If you notice that little problem with my printer at the end of that segment, I forgot to change my paper from sheet to roll, and so my printer thought it had a sheet in it. I decided it wasn't worth going back and fixing. So anyway, let's talk about how to do something like this for roll paper. So what I want to do is print two 11x14s with two 6x9 prints in the middle, and I want to do it on 24-inch wide paper. So similar steps, we're just going to hit page setup, and this time we need to pick a 24x14-inch paper. And the 14 inch is critical because that's exactly how big we want the print. And when we're done, the 14-inch side will actually already be cut for us. I'll show you how I do that. Easiest thing to do is just delete all the cells that are on there. I don't need any of them. So here we go. Let's add a cell, and we'll make it 14 inches tall, 11 inches wide. There we go. Let's pop to the left. We're going to Option or Alt drag that cell. And again, notice it won't pop until I let go of the mouse button, and then re-click, and now it will pop. Okay, I'm going to add one more cell. And again, we'll drag it back over here and close that page. We don't need it. And this cell we're going to make 9.25 inches wide. And the reason I want to go 2.5 is my mat that I talked about earlier is already cut exactly 6x9. So we want to make the image slightly bigger than that so we don't have a little sliver of white showing. Okay, drag that to the corner. Again, Option or Alt, drag this box down, pop it into the bottom corner. We have to let go first. Now we're going to drag this down here. Now you'll notice because I changed my size. Oh, remember we have to click here, then click back into this box to get our size there. Because I changed my size, I'm no longer 5 inches. Now I'm not a whiz at math. I'm pretty sure this is 4 3/8 inches, but sometimes this gets a little confusing. So I thought I'd just show a little nice trick for those that on our Mac. If you want to divide this in half quickly, just click here. Now go up and select your search button and just put the math in there. So 4.75 divided by 2. Hit Command C to copy that. Click back over here and hit Command V to paste. And there's your size. Now, as soon as I click out, you'll notice it'll go to 0.38 because Lightroom only works to 1/100th of an inch. And I can paste it in there because it's the same. So just a nice little quick, a lot of people don't know you can use the Mac search button to actually do a math formula. Drag it down here, drag this one here, and pop. And to make this a little more complicated, I'm going to drag this one over here. Option again and hold and drag it over. Now again, remember I have to click and then click, and now I can change it. I'm going to make this 6.75 because I have one size of mat that's just 9 by 6.5. Okay, we're going to drag it up here. I'm going to go ahead and drag this one over here because I don't need it anymore. And I'm going to drag it up here. And again, do the math. Now this one we already know because we just did it, so I can just paste that in. And again, we'll do this here just for those that want to watch. So 4.25 divided by 2, Command C to copy, click back over here, Command V to paste, and then Tab to get out of that. So now we can drag this one here and drag this there. And we can now delete this cell. So let's drag a couple images here. I like this one. It's one of my favorite. That's actually the moon setting on Maui, not the sun. And I like this one. This is a more recent one of mine. This is a pretty cool spot here in Utah. And we're ready to print. Now, before I print, I need to add one thing. I know with my Epson printer, if I print this layout just like it has, this left-hand print will actually only be 10 7/8 inches wide. Because my Epson printer is about 1/8 of an inch off on the left side. And this border here will be about 1/8 of an inch shorter than this border over here. Now I could still go ahead and do that because I'm putting it under a mat and I can just put it flush with this side and let this side be a little short. But I'm kind of one of those guys that like things to be perfect. So I thought I'd show a nice easy way that you can make up for that if your printer seems to be off. One thing I've noticed, the printers seem to be consistent. I mean, mine's 1/8 of an inch off no matter what I do, no matter how I load it. So let me just show you how I do that. What I found is if I go to this cell here and then I change this size and I drop it by 1/8 of an inch. So we're going to go 10.875 or 88, I guess. Okay, and now I drag this over here. Okay. And now if I drag this cell out of the way and I go back in here again and I change it back to 11, you'll notice that I now end up, I'm 1/8 of an inch away from this edge. That to me has been the easiest way I found to do it. So resize it while this cell is here, which forces this edge to move over. Move this cell away and resize it back to 11. And now I can pop this back over here. Now obviously I've got to resize all of these because I just did that. Option that down. Now when I option, you'll notice I got the picture in there, which I don't want. So I'm just going to add a new cell instead. Okay. And drag that down. Whoops. And then divide it by 2. There we go. And then we'll drag it over here. And this is 2.13, I believe. And one way you can check real quick if you're centered is to just drag this box to the other corners. And it should pop. So you can tell, see, that is actually centered. So now if I print this, if everything works out right, this here, this little line won't actually show because it's where the edge of the paper is going to be. All right, so let's go ahead and print this layout. We need to change a few settings first. I'm going to go to print settings here. And I'm going to go to printer settings. I need to change it to roll paper, borderless, retain size. And this retain size is critical. Roll paper or borderless auto expand won't work. So retain size. We've got luster paper, super photo. Now because I've set it to roll paper borderless, I can turn on one other option now. If I go to roll paper settings, I can move from normal cut to double cut. Double cut will stop when the print reaches the cutter at the bottom edge or at the top edge first, and it will stop and cut, and then we'll continue to print, and then we'll cut the other. And so when I get done, I only have to make 2 cuts on this print. And I've got 2 11x14s without cutting any of the other edges. It's one reason I like using roll paper. It just is faster. We're going to save that. So now because we've set everything up here, I don't need to click the printer button because I know that I just set it up here. It's the same thing. I've already set up print settings. If I save this as a template, then as long as I don't change anything, then I don't also need to hit the printer button. Like I said, I'm going to show that a little more in detail in another video. Anyway, let's hit print and see what we get. Now because again we have a little line to deal with, it takes a little longer because it's got to go over the entire sheet of paper, even though it's not putting out hardly any ink. I wanted to show how the borderless cut thing works. So the printer's printing now, and when it gets to the point that the 14-inch side lines up with the paper cutter, it will stop for a second and will cut that off for me. And then when it's done, it will get it set to the right place. So even though it can't seem to get the head centered this direction like it's supposed to, it can nail that for some reason. So in a second, we'll see that cut. Okay, so that just cut the slug off. So now I don't have to trim that side anymore. And like I said, this is really not much more waste than you would have if you printed it normal, and you'd have to cut about 1 inch or 3/4 of an inch off of each of the ends manually. So maybe maybe 1/2 inch more paper, but way less time. So when it's done here in a minute, then we can take a look at it and we'll see how well I did. So I'm just about done printing. All it's printing is this one little tiny fraction of an inch, microscopic line on this one side. That's my one cut guide. And it's got to go all the way to the edge of my 14-inch piece of paper. So moving back and forth, but not laying down any ink. If I didn't have the cut guides, it wouldn't be having to move it. Would just go past it. But as you'll see in a second, they're pretty useful. Okay, we're done printing. I'm not sure what it's doing. Obviously only Epson knows. Okay, go back and forth a few times. I've always been puzzled by this part of printers. This is done printing. Why don't you just slide it out and cut it off? Now, because of the way I set it up, this is exactly 14 inches wide. It's not 1/8 of an inch too long. It's perfect. And I've got two little lines. I'm not sure you can see them. I'm going to try it, but you see there's a little cut line right there and another one here. All I've got to do is go slice this two lines on my cutter, and I've got two perfect 11 by 14s. Very, very quick. Be right back. So here are my two prints, 11 by 14, and if I line them up, and you can see up close that they're both exactly 11 by 14 inches wide, ready to mat and frame. This is a pretty cool technique. You can use it for any type of border print you want, any size of piece of paper you want. All you've got to do is make that little box, divide it by 2, and snap the corners together, and you'll end up with a perfect print. And if your paper is not the exact size that you want, you can adjust it. And that little thing I did with the 1/8 of an inch, even if your final size is a 13 by 19 sheet of paper, you could still put that 1/8 of an inch in there and then allow for that in your corners to slide the middle over, and you can get a perfectly centered print, compensating for that drift that the printer seems to have, because whatever causes that seems to be consistent. It's always there. It doesn't get bigger or smaller. It doesn't matter where you load the paper. You can try to load the paper over further. Printer still sees where the paper is, so it's always there. And because it's consistent, you can actually get around it pretty easy. Well, hopefully the video gives you some ideas on how to speed up your printing workflow. Thanks for watching.